All right, thank you for joining us today, and I call the January 12th, 2023 meeting of the Police Advisory and Oversight Board to order. Let's begin with an introduction of commission members, but I do want to say that we do have David on the line, right? I don't have to press any buttons for that, right? Okay, I'm good. Go ahead.
Tanya Graywind.
Scott Paul.
Joanna Johnson.
Lucretia King.
Todd Spellberg.
Conrad Thomas.
And Dave Hoganson.
All right. The next item is to approve the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. I believe David had brought up a request. Are you there, David?
Yes.
Yes. Did you, you had mentioned wanting to motion to remove something from the agenda?
No changes.
Okay, no changes. So all those in favor of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, motion carried. All right, the next is approving the minutes. These are the minutes from the December 8th, 2022 meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Those in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Opposed? Okay. The next item is public comment. So those who wish to address the Police Advisory and Oversight Board must use the sign-in sheet. Speakers must state their name and will be limited to 2 minutes. Comments should not contain any profanity or personal attacks. Do we have anyone signed up for comment?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have 3. Our first on the list is I apologize, is that Benson or Bonson? Benson, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Emily Benson, and I moved to Fargo about 5 years ago, and when I moved here, I started noticing some things about how the police were treating members of the community. Having been a former law enforcement officer, I went through 2 police academies in 2 different states. So, I'm thinking about, I guess the chief is not here today, but I remember the chief making a comment that, we community members don't really understand what the police do or why they take certain actions and that kind of thing. So some of us do understand why certain things are done the way that they're done. However, and I'll be specific as to the Shane Netterville incident, and I will call it a homicide. Having been through those police academies, I'm still in a quandary as to a couple of things that I noticed from the videos, from the presentation that the police had. 2 things in particular, well, many things, but I'll narrow it down to 2 because I have limited time. And they both have to do with officer position and where Officer O'Brien was when this incident occurred. And falling back on training, safety of yourself as an officer, but safety of the other officers, their positioning, using lethal force to, if it's needed, to minimize any other damage to people or harm to other people. I think there's a huge failure in the training if North Dakota does not train that these things need to be addressed in training, in the SOPs at the police department. They need to be very, very obvious to officers for their safety and so that incidents like this don't continue to happen. It's hard to see things happening with this police department that shouldn't be happening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Brian Glaske.
Hello, Madam Chair. I have a presentation. I was wondering if I could have it displayed.
This is just a public comment period.
Okay. Can I have my 15 seconds back for, I don't know if I want to have that. Can I have my time reset? Because that was a question for you.
Yeah. Yeah, so approved.
Okay, all right. So my name is Brian Glasky. I decided to go through the BCI report in fairly detailed fashion. And I have I don't have enough time in the 2 minutes to go through all the things that I noticed. I will notice related to Ms. Benson is that the BCI report did not accurately place the officers in the scene, even though they have software that can do that kind of thing. I feel like that there's a bunch of gaps in this report. Another gap or interesting item from the BCI report is that the investigators allowed the officer's attorney to ask leading questions, which then they use as statements of fact in the report. One of the other things they did not provide is the speed of the vehicle in terms that people can understand. And I have a bunch of, I believe members of the board have seen some of my presentations, so I'm going to have to make this very quick. The first 7 feet that the vehicle was moving, it was moving at about 5 miles per hour. Now, the chief and the attorney general would like to say that that was the speed of a bullet, but for comparison, a bullet moves at 741 miles per hour. So it's kind of quite a distance between the speed of a bullet and 5 miles an hour. We're also wondering why EMS was not dispatched. Officer O'Brien thought he was responding to a medical call, and I'm trying to figure out why it took nearly 5 minutes and 38 seconds until CPR was applied by EMS if it wasn't, in fact, a medical call. Going through this, I believe that what the conclusion I have from this is that Officer O'Brien was startled when the car started, and he instinctively pulled the trigger. And I'm not faulting him for that. I think but again, back to the training aspect, I think we need to have better training.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chris Cohen.
Yeah, Christopher Cohn, Fargo resident. And so I think it was at the last meeting that it was stated that you're not set up to do any investigations. But according to the ordinance, you're supposed to be doing reviews. And in one part of that, it actually uses the word investigation. So I don't know if you say you're not set up for it, maybe you don't have any budget, but you can request a budget. So the mayor puts through a budget for the following year, fiscal year in June. So what you can do is you can request money send it to him before June, prior to June. That's when he makes his decision, so that you have resources to do that. And you can also ask the FPD to do tasks for you if you need assistance. And that's what other boards and commissions do. They have staff from whatever department that they're assigned to help assist them. And I also wanted to say that one of the duties of this board is to advise the department about community concerns. And you know that the Shane Netterville killing is a community concern. It's come to you many times by many people. And you're supposed to review post-discipline findings at formal professional standards, divisions investigations of misconduct by department members. Now remember, there was a policy violation. The officers are not supposed to be shooting at any vehicle that's attempting to flee if they can get out of the way. And at no point did Officer O'Brien ever attempt to get out of the way. And in fact, if you watch the video, you'll see that he steps forward 3 times with the movement of the van before he shoots. And so he actually places himself alongside the vehicle. By the way, the vehicle never goes toward him, as is stated in the BCI investigation. That's why we've called for an independent investigation, because that's just the police organization, and they're defending this police organization.
Thank you. The next item is department updates. Let's begin with Sergeant Jacobson, who was going to discuss logistics to the upcoming town hall listening session.
Sure, I just wanted to let you know that we have the established location. Initially, we were going to try to have it at the Fargo Cass Public Health Facility in their Oak Room. However, due to some flooding that occurred, we relocated the location to being right across in Sky Commons in the same location where we had previously had the brown bag. So it is established for Wednesday, January 25th, starting at 6 p.m. We are in the process of creating an invite to the community. The invitation will be placed on all of the social media platforms throughout the city. It will be emailed to the Human Rights Commission, the Native American Commission, and the Cultural Advisory Committee within the Fargo Police Department. It will also be sent to all media sources, and then all of you on the board will also get the invite to continue to disseminate to your own social media circles. We are looking to have dialogue with you pertaining to kind of guide the community on what you may want to know about to include on the invite. And so we are looking to have sort of topics that we can categorize so that when we take notes and organize all of that, it is well organized. And so we are looking to have recommended training topics to be presented and discussed at future police advisory and oversight board meetings. So you're asking the public to give that advice to you. Also, public recommendations for training topics for the Fargo Police Department and the law enforcement officers and staff. Recommendations for training topics that the public is interested in receiving from the police department. Recommendations on how to improve the diversity within the department in both recruitment and retention efforts. General enforcement questions to a law enforcement officer. And then the wrap-up of miscellaneous questions and concerns that might not fall into these categories. Mm-hmm. Thoughts on that type of an organizational process for the invite, or if there's an additional outstanding topic that you think should come out of that catch-all miscellaneous that you would specifically like to know from the community.
That's a wide range of topics for sure. So I think a lot of questions would fall under one of those categories, you know, or concerns, right? Whether it's the police training or the public training, things like the diversity, general law enforcement. I think those are all really good. Well, the things that I was thinking of actually would be falling in those categories as well, so.
I think use of force is obviously a desired topic to discuss, so
Sure.
just be proactive and put that on there.
So can you clarify, like, you're asking the public to be educated about specifically, like you want
Provide input.
input on how officers utilize force?
To provide their thoughts on,
Just thoughts in general?
just thoughts in general on police use of force.
Also, maybe thoughts on de-escalation. And I don't know whether we would have the opportunity, once we talk to our communities, if they would like to inject other topics, would we have to send those types of topics so that they could be put on the agenda?
No, so of course, there's the catch-all at the end. So if there's not a particular topic already listed. But oftentimes, if you just say, come and meet police officers and the advisory board members, sometimes they're, maybe they don't know exactly what you want to know. And so oftentimes we have found we have more insightful requests from the public if we put initial thoughts in their mind, like we know we want to know about this, but anything else you can think of that you also want to address to the advisory board is authorized for sure. That's why we always have that last comment of miscellaneous and things. So if you don't think of something right now and it doesn't make it on the recommended topics that we already know we want to seek the public's input on, that doesn't mean it can't be discussed at this meeting. That is not implied in any way.
And I think that de-escalation, Conrad, could easily, fall under the police training topics, right?
I
mean,
agree, yeah.
You know, how they're trained with that, unless you had something else in mind with the de-escalation.
But also topics that we want to discuss in the board, future board meetings as well. So I think it fits in a couple different categories.
Right.
We're good?
So,
It should also be noted, just FYI, that, it will go out to media sources because quorum will be present and it will be annotated that, to just let the public know that no action will be taken at this meeting, that it's really just to listen to the public about their concerns on the variety of topics, but also anything else that the public would like to bring to our attention, both as staff as well as you as board members. We kind of annotated on the invite that the purpose of the event is to engage with law enforcement and advisory and oversight board members while we seek to elicit information from the public on a variety of topics. Is that accurate? And you're comfortable with that on the invite?
I am.
Yeah.
We were just trying to move away from like, hey, here's an agenda
Sure.
of the board. We wanted it to seem a little bit more personal, and so we're doing it a little bit more like an invitation.
And so one of the questions I have, so breaking down these topics, would there be times for those topics? So, no, it's just like when it happens or in any order.
So I will moderate, and so we will kind of start out. We're all going to be kind of new at this one, and so we're not sure how many individuals will attend, and so we didn't want to be overly specific and like you get 15 minutes on this topic and 10 minutes on this topic. We'll
Right.
just say, did anyone have anything about, and we'll start from the top and move to the bottom, but ultimately we have the catch-all at the end as well for any additional topic that may be. And then we have some flexibility by not having really an end time so that we're, if 2 people show up, we're still not obligated to stay for, 90 minutes or however. And so we'll continue to evaluate how these go so that you can continue to have discussions on the frequency and the locations moving forward throughout the time.
As far as the logistics of it, then, how long will they have to, will the public have, or will we give them a time to speak, or just in the event that there are multiple people, to give everybody an opportunity?
What is your opinion and so we process this too. It's complex, I think a lot of it'll be situational depending on how many people arrive, and we'll have to have kind of that conversation. And as a moderator, I will attempt to keep the conversation going so everyone else has the ability to also speak and one person does not, speak for 60 minutes. I think that's also why we try to guide the topics a little bit so that as many people will have the opportunity to present.
Sergeant Jacobson, besides
Yes, sir.
yourself, who else in your department will possibly be attending?
I know the chief will be, and I do not know who is committed after that. So for sure, you'll have myself and the chief. Our chain of command, and we'll all be notified and welcome to attend. Are you making a special request?
Not really, but might be nice to have others give their perspective on certain topics, and so it just gives a difference of opinion, possibly, or how they approach certain questions and things like that, than yourself or the chief. So just a little bit more diversity.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns or recommendations pertaining to this? And of course, we'll send, like I said, the invite out to all of you to continue to disseminate. We anticipate that getting out very early next week so that there's over a week where it will be disseminated throughout all of our social media platforms.
Right. And we did make this date last month, so it's been out there, the date has been out there, you know, so, okay.
Any other questions or comments or?
And just to clarify, this is a listening session, right? So it's not, we're listening to what the public is saying. We're not necessarily going back and forth. It's not a Q&A session.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
with the exception of if there's a very specific question for a law enforcement officer, depending on the complexity of the question, we will either like, oh, what's the speed limit on this road? We can answer that quickly. If it is complex based off of a very, specific case or whatever, we will document the name and information and then contact that individual so that we will be sure to get that information back to them and those kinds of things as well during that law enforcement Q&A if that is a need. But
I think it'll be
yes.
very valuable. I think we've seen the feedback that, maybe 2 minutes isn't enough for messages to get across. So I think this will be a great opportunity to hear a little bit more detail from the public on their concerns. So
Sure.
I'm glad we're doing it.
Notes will be taken and then, of course, redistributed to you so that in the future you can analyze in an attempt to guide us on the prioritization of the topics that you want educated and presented to you as a board. Because we have a whole host of things that we think you want to know, but we could really use your guidance in the prioritization of them. We have anticipated presentations about our officers training and de-escalation and use of force and, our annual report and a multitude of other topics. And so we can always process what the public comes to you with as well.
Anything further?
No, impressed.
Any input? David, you're still there?
Yep, I'm listening.
Okay. All right. I guess we'll go on to the next item on the agenda, which is the board discussion pertaining to the development of bylaws.
Okay. So I sent a list of things that we already knew the board wanted clarification and conversation pertaining to. And we are, of course, not limited to that. And so we would like to request or that you have conversation in the development of bylaws so that not only you as a board are very clear on some of these items, but also that we can be respectful to the public and so that they understand all of these nuances in the logistics as well. And so we know that there's a lot of conversation surrounding the topic of public comment and the duration and those types of things. And so we would like you to discuss now amongst you as board members on your opinions on how public comment is going, the duration, is it enough, is it not enough? All of those types of things to start.
I think seems like an agreement that 2 minutes probably isn't the appropriate amount of time for public comments. People are just getting into into the meat and potatoes of what they want to talk about, and their time is done. So I think the city council is 3 or 4 minutes.
2.5.
I think it's 2.5.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. It's 2.5 minutes. I think 3 or 4 maybe would be an appropriate. It's going to eat into additional agenda time, but I think if not listening to the public, what more important thing do we have on an agenda, than that? So I think that's, of all the things we're doing, that's probably the most important thing. I think 3 to 4 minutes is probably a starting point. If we say 4 minutes and it's too long, if we're cutting into half the agenda, then maybe we go back to 3. That's my thought.
So I was thinking about the same thing, and I agree that the time is probably too short to be able to get everything, discussed. But what about, because our time is limited during these meetings, to the hour, what if we hold quarterly town hall meetings to address public concern and eliminate the public comment from this meeting so that we can address all of those issues during this time? That was something I had thought about.
That's an interesting perspective, yeah.
I agree with both. Public comments are good, but I question though, where do these comments go? Obviously, to continue to come up and to speak and to voice one's opinion, and when it seems as though that your opinions aren't going anywhere, then you become somewhat frustrated. And so, I don't think we just have public comments to have public comments, but there has to be some substance behind what should happen once a community member or makes a comment. So, and I don't know how to address that nor what should be done, but obviously it's when someone comes up to make a speech or speak on something, it is important because they're here to just waste time. They're here to say something which needs to that the board needs to consider and really take to heart and figure out what to do next.
Right. My thought on the 3 to 4 minutes is then do you limit the number of people who can speak, which then narrows the window. So if you have 60 minutes and we have an agenda and you allow 4 minutes and 5 people, that's 20 minutes out of a 60-minute meeting. And then the comments are just that. It's not a Q&A. It's not a back and forth. And so more time to maybe get the point across. I definitely hear that. But, at the same time, it's not a back and forth. We're not answering questions, So I wonder too, like, I never thought of that, Tanya, but I mean, just changing the.
My only concern with Tanya's idea is that if we do a listening session once a quarter, then individuals have to make that one meeting every 3 months if they want their voice heard. Versus
Good
once a
point.
month to be able to come in here, even if it's just for a couple minutes. We're giving them, in a 3-month window, we're then giving them at least 4 opportunities to express their interests and their concerns to the board. So I think if we get it wrong, we can fix it. Whatever we decide doesn't have to be set in stone. I think it'd probably be appropriate how about we try 3 minutes and see how that goes moving forward. Is that fair?
And then, are you still allowing 5 people with 3 minutes? Because normally we do have 3 people usually on average.
Yeah.
In the past, we've limited to 10 minutes total, and so that's where the 5 people came in. So are you still anticipating the 10 minutes total, 3 minutes, then you're limiting it to 3 people in 9 minutes?
I think we could keep it 5 people. I mean, 15 minutes is, in my mind, still a,
That's just 1/6 more.
yeah.
I think we can do that.
If we set 15 minutes for listening to the public,
Yeah, I think we should try that. Give it a
Right.
try.
all right. I move that we amend to 3 minutes for the listening to the public per person.
I second that.
Second.
You move, you second it. So are we in agreement that we would want to change the current structure of 2 minutes and 5 people, which is 10 minutes, to the structure of 3 minutes and 5 people to 15 minutes in the board meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, can we have a vote? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay?
Abstain.
Okay. All right, so that was move the public comment to 3 minutes per individual, with still keeping the 5-person cap. Okay. I think one of the other things that we didn't discuss in that, which we can still talk now, and maybe you were gonna bring that up too, but the yielding of time, right? So if you have 5 people set up and, you're talking, and then I just say, well, you can have mine 3 minutes, and then the next person's like, well, you can have mine. Then you have one person talking for 6 or 9 or 12. Do we wanna limit the yielding of time? Or, allow it or not allow it, or
How is it done on other boards?
I've only seen it yielded once of the ones I've been watching, but I don't.
Yeah, that hasn't been a practice at the city commission meeting.
Okay.
Can I interject a comment?
Yes?
I like the idea of 3 minutes. This evening, when Brian Glaske spoke, it reminded me that maybe we should consider a lot. So if a citizen produces a PowerPoint or a slide and they've gone through the efforts to convey an opinion or citizen concern, should they have the ability to forward that prior to the meeting so that that can be shown via video as part of their 3-minute presentation? And I'm thinking maybe we want to talk a little bit about that. Because on the surface, I like the idea of somebody who's prepared a visual to be able to present that to the board and the public.
I can comment on that. So the presentation was sent in and it was forwarded to all of you. And then when the initial request came in, we consulted with the city commission and their staff, and it is just public comment timeline. The city does not, I don't have the exact wording, but it essentially, we were told it is not done during public comment. And so public presentations are, public comment timeframe is for verbal presentations, and they have historically not ever allowed and do not,
Right, and I believe that,
during public comment timeframe. Yeah.
right, and I do believe, I think it was it worked well to submit it online, and then that was, all that information that's submitted online is forwarded to us board members, and so we were able to actually review that prior to comment, you know?
So could something like that be done at our town hall meetings?
I was gonna say the same, yeah.
I think it's up to us, right? We can, at a listening session, how,
I think if they want to provide, you the presentation, I don't think that we would display it, because that also might I think it can also,
You would have to vet that.
You'd have to
prior-
vet that.
Yeah. prior to-
Suddenly something could pop up that,
That's correct.
Yeah, that's a good point. You don't know what's gonna come up, okay. All right, but the call to order here. Return to order. So I'm not, I think submitting the PowerPoint is appropriate. Myself. Right, that way we have a copy. True, the public doesn't, but there are other ways to disseminate through the public outside of this board.
it's like Conrad said earlier, if we find it value, that opinion, we can ask that it be shown at the next board meeting, correct?
We can,
That can be put on the agenda to show
That's correct.
a PowerPoint later on if we find it valid. So,
what do you,
That's how it would work?
submitting it online so that we have a way to view it? And if it was something that was moving or of pertinence to the
Board.
conversation, right? That the board felt as a whole was appropriate, then maybe being able to submit it to be
Add it to our
vetted.
agenda.
yeah, we'd have to add it
It's
to
an
the
agenda.
just add it to our agenda.
so that is accurate. We can guarantee that all communications that are received through the communication contact form through the website is sent to you as board members to discuss and determine how you would like to absorb that information, and again, what you would like to do with it. And of course, you can make requests and determine whether it is on the next agenda or a future agenda in those types of things. So that is accurate, that the information at a minimum is presented to all of you and forwarded. And then from there, it would be a board decision on what is done with it at that point.
So then if there was something that was compelling, I guess I don't think any of us, I don't know that anyone does, but how that does like get submitted otherwise to be shown, like it still has to go somewhere, right? Does it still have to be approved by anyone else, or?
It should also be noted that even if it is not presented in any fashion for whatever determination, because it was received through the contact form and disseminated to you as board members, it is available to the public as a request for open records.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Is that something we need to vote on? I don't really know that that's a,
No change.
yeah, it's no change, right? So there's.
Not in reference to the presentations, but we're requesting, is it my understanding then, you as a board are not doing the yielding of time.
Yeah, and I was gonna circle back to that, because I think we kind of,
Moved way away.
yeah, we moved away from that.
Yeah, I just don't know how would you one manage that, right?
Yeah, right.
It becomes.
I would
a bit-
prefer not
yeah.
to, myself, I'd
Yeah.
prefer not to.
I think
Great.
the fact that we have the listening sessions coming up on a regular basis and we're increasing the amount of time, I think it opens up too many cans of worms if we allow
Start
folks to
yielding
yield time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just,
So is that something we need to vote on as well?
Yes, we would appreciate that, and we'll put that in the bylaw so it is very clear to the public as well.
Okay,
So I motion that we do not allow yielding of time
during public comments.
during public comments.
I'll second.
all right, we have that discussion. So, motion is that we will not be yielding time during public comment session. And those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Okay, motion is carried.
Okay, we wanted to walk through the logistics of the agenda creation and the timeline so that we allow you to process information requests and also for the staff to be prepared and those types of things. So we wanted to work through the clarification of how the agenda is created and by who and the timeline. And then we will also move on to how items are requested and the timeline of the dissemination and so forth. So procedurally, how we have been going is with the meeting being the second Thursday of the month. The Friday prior to that is an agenda-setting meeting between the chair, the vice chair, and the chief, of which I'm also present as the staff member. And the logistics and final and details of the agenda are established at that meeting. And then historically, any edits or things that come about from that meeting are processed through me, and then early the next week, we disseminate that draft agenda to all of the board members, and it is also distributed to all media contacts and the public as well in preparation for this meeting on Thursday. So also, as we were talking about the received communications through the contact form, in order to get that to you to process, to determine, did you have an opinion about that? Did you want to have a discussion about that? Should it be on the agenda or not? We are trying to determine the appropriate timeline so that you get that information, but at the same time, we are trying to be cognizant of not sending you a multitude of emails on a regular basis. So what I have been doing up to this point is, from the time of this meeting on, I collect all of the contact communications and then disseminate it to you approximately 2 weeks prior to this meeting and such as well. So some of that guidelines on the duration and time that you need, and those types of things is what we're looking for in that discussion so that we can establish, okay, how much time do you need to process? How much time do you need to give recommendations? Who do you send those recommendations to? So we had worked through a thought process of that we would forward the public comment essentially approximately, I think we decided, we were discussing approximately 2 weeks prior to the board meeting would be appropriate so that you had several days to process and determine and give your recommendation to the chair and vice chair so that we're not trying to figure out if it's even possible to put the items on the agenda in case it requires the invite of a presenter or something like that, or the logistics of getting the data to make the requests. So we're just trying to balance that.
Right, like, I don't want to skip ahead, but I think part of that is that kind of timeline, right, that you're talking about here. I'll tell you, as far as the chair position and the vice chair position, I don't want to speak for you, Lucy, so interrupt me or whatever, but it is, we meet with the chief the Friday before our meetings to discuss the agenda. It's very difficult to get a request, say, the day before meeting with the chief, because it's not enough time to even have a discussion with the request, whoever put the request in, like, that's been a challenge, I know, for myself, and there's like not enough time to go, where did this come from, what's the, how do we present it, how do we understand it, that kind of stuff. That's been a challenge, I think.
I know that we are trying to balance ensuring that you as the board members and your interests of having things on the agenda, that you feel heard and supported, but also recognizing the complexity of having the capability of reaching out to and organizing the presenter in a very short timeline, requesting the subject matter expert, one, to be available, to have the time to create that presentation and be prepared for that. And so, that essentially less than a week timeline is complex. And so we're still working through and processing that as well. And so oftentimes if these the agenda item requests are made, oftentimes it's not a no, we're not going to have it. It's, it might not make it on this agenda, but we're adding it to the list of all of the things you as a very new board want to learn and process and discuss.
In my mind, there's two separate issues that are related. If a member of the public sends something in through the process, in my mind, I'd like to see that as soon as possible. I don't want to wait for an arbitrary, 2 weeks prior to the board meeting. I'd like to see it as soon as it comes in, rather than waiting, because then I'm afraid that 3 days prior to the board meeting, if a message comes in, then we're going to wait 2 additional weeks beyond to even hear from the public on that one. So for me, if a message comes in from the public, my ask would be that it gets disseminated to the board as quickly as possible. The other side of that coin then is requests to go on an agenda, whether that's internal or external, input requesting something to be on the agenda. I agree. I feel that we have a tight timeline already getting things approved for the agenda prior to be able to announce it and still have an orderly meeting. I think that the timeline that we've executed to this point, where you guys meet with the chief and finalize an agenda, I think that has worked somewhat. I think that's worked fairly well. And so I feel like we can keep that timeline working. My only ask would be the public comments to be disseminated as we get them.
That is, of course, easily doable. I just also want to recognize that there's the potential of, I don't know how frequently you check your emails and those kinds of complexities, and I want to be respectful of your time as volunteers. And so if you had wanted, I know on this date I'm going to get the agenda sent to me. I know on this date I'm going to get all of the public comment sent to me all in one push, those types of things as well. That was the intent of the organization, not to, any other reason. But if you are saying that is not your preference, that is an easy fix. But we're just trying to balance also your time as volunteers.
Right. Yeah, I get that. I think, I would I mean, being the chair of a new board and, having a lot happening, and a lot of communication stuff going on, but it is difficult to get, a really loaded email, on a request to put something on the agenda when you're meeting the next day, and you don't have a backstory, you don't have a way to present it. It's just, then it becomes, that request is just turned in, and there's no backstory to it. See what I mean? So if you get a request that's, you don't maybe understand where it's coming from, or you just want to have a way to understand it so that the conversation can go easier during the meeting, it would be nice to have a little more time so that you're not, 7 or 8 o'clock at night trying to call someone or something, or just try to understand, Do you,
So if you're looking for guidance, I guess we
Yeah.
would recommend that you would give the chair, the vice chair, and the chief at least a week prior to the agenda setting meeting to discuss any additional items that may need to be added so that, one, we can process and contemplate the request, and two, even if we want, if it's a 100% agreement, everyone wants it on the agenda, but we can't get the appropriate person committed for that timeline, all of that can be understood, but we have that time to reach out and even make those requests in a respectful manner, as opposed to, hey, are you available in 3 days, or those kinds of things. And
I like
so-
the idea of setting a deadline to submit for the agenda. I think that's an appropriate request.
Absolutely.
To set a deadline. But, I don't think that it limits anybody from sending you something the night before. It just won't go on that agenda.
Right,
It would
exactly.
go on the following if
exactly.
it was
If there
deemed
was a
as-
deadline.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I think most agencies work that way. I know mine does, so.
And we do have the flexibility that if there is something pressing that we needed to, that's not on the agenda, we can amend the agenda.
Yeah, sure.
And add it to the agenda at the beginning, yes.
Right, right. So even I know some people have more time on weekends, some people work weekends, and maybe a weekend is a better time for someone to craft something, that they want to talk about. Even the Monday before meeting with the chief is more time, I'd be willing to kind of,
Since you two are the two that meet with the chief, what number of days are you looking for? The week sounded really good. I don't have to do it, so I'm not in.
Yeah, exactly.
That
You
week-
might be
week-
doing it someday.
You set Monday?
That,
Well, yeah, either the Friday before meeting with the chief or the Monday before meeting with the chief. Again, I'm thinking weekends, I work and I'm really busy in the week, and I don't often have time during the week to do things, and then I don't call at 7 at night or something, it's.
So the Friday before would be an appropriate
Yeah.
amendment to, I think that's an appropriate request.
Can we say Friday noon? Are we saying Friday 4 p.m.? Because the request will go to the chair, the vice chair, and the
absolutely.
chief, and then for us as staff
Yeah.
to
And
to work
anything
through the
after that
logistics.
timeline will still be received. It's not that it's not being
Correct.
received, so it's just like to think, to be able to formulate it and think about it and present it appropriate and understand it so that we know how
so do you
we're
want
moving.
us to make a motion on this?
Please.
Close business on Friday?
Well, let's just give it time, noon.
Yeah.
So I motion that all agenda requests need to be submitted by Friday noon, the week prior
To meeting with.
to meeting with the chief
To be included for that month's.
for that month's agenda.
To be
To be
considered.
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 Yes.
There you go.
There you go.
I'll second.
Okay. So the motion is that a deadline be placed on submission to the agenda for items to be considered for the agenda, Friday noon, the week before the chief and the chair and vice chair meet. Is that correct? Yep.
Correct.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, opposed? Nay, okay. Motion carried.
Okay, so I'm just going to walk you through all of the various dates. And if there's any additional clarity that you need, we will also make sure that these dates and things are very clear on our website as well. So the Friday before the agenda setting meeting is when we request all requests for agenda setting considerations be emailed to the chair, the vice chair, and the chief by noon. The following Friday is when the agenda setting meeting occurs between the chief, the chair, and the vice chair. The first business day after that Friday is when I will publish that drafted agenda to all of the board members. And it will also be disseminated to the media contacts for public communication of the draft agenda.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, the next, we wanted to request, actually, the adding of the agenda items on the day of the meeting. We wanted to have dialogue on the complexity of that. So as you know, adding an agenda item is within your scope and capabilities according to Robert's rules. We just wanted to process with you the complexity of having those agenda items added at the last minute, not only due to the scope of the 1 hour timeline of the meeting, and then also, second, it does not give the public notice and awareness to the topic being discussed if they had an interest in being present or presenting anything about that. And then thirdly, we, of course, as staff are completely unaware to be prepared to comment or have any prepared education pertaining to the conversation. So with that in mind, we just wanted thoughts on, did you wish to still have the ability to add items on the day of?
I
or
think it's a
not?
valuable
I think it's
flexibility.
important, yes.
I do.
Yes.
Yeah, I move that we keep the flexibility to amend the agenda the day of the meeting.
I'll second that. Sorry, if yours continue.
No, it's fine.
So any discussion?
You
to
don't
the-
need to vote on that
Okay.
because you already have that
Okay.
right to do
Sorry.
so. We
All
just,
I withdraw my movement.
sorry. 'Cause-
I do, though, agree with the idea that when you put something on the agenda, it gives people the opportunity to know what's going to be talked about, which gives people an opportunity to come and give a public comment about that, or to, you
Sure.
know, have the conversation, you know, even as a board member, but I do think that the flexibility is nice because we don't know what comes up and what we feel is pertinent or urgent.
Sure.
You know, but it is, sometimes, like you said, you're not prepared and you're trying to understand and then come up with the questions at that moment, but then we can always table things.
For sure.
Right.
Just because the conversation is had,
Yeah.
there's no requirement to act.
Yeah.
So you can add the
Right.
item on if you feel so strongly and it's voted to be approved by the rest of you, and,
Yeah.
and that conversation and then, can of course occur.
Right.
So it just, okay. So we just wanted it very clearly articulated. The duration of the meeting is 60 minutes. And if we do not get through the entire agenda, that we would table items for subsequent meetings. Of course, give or take a few minutes.
Which we're at right now, by the way.
Oh. Good to know.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I think maybe also establishing if we do go over, because sometimes there's a lot to talk about and we can't get through things. And we have gone over as a board, but I know all of our time is, we have our own personal lives and stuff, but I'd like to know, like, are we okay with yielding a specific time? Like if we, like it's right now, 6 o'clock, we end the meeting, or do we allow a buffer to that, or?
I guess I have a question with that. So if you look at our agenda right now, I think the swearing is still on it. Do those tabled items move to the top of the agenda for the next meeting? Because I just don't want to see it constantly get pushed to the end where we just run out of time meeting after meeting as
Right.
well.
Right,
For sure, we can make sure that occurs.
yeah.
Yep.
Right, because I know that was added to the agenda last time, right? And then it's still on the agenda today.
Sure. So due to the time constraint, we would table that item and we would be sure that it is the first item after.
On the agenda,
Well, after, yes.
after the,
So it would be the first topic of discussion amongst the board members for sure. And then
first order of business.
we had a few other communications pertaining to bylaws surrounding the topic of just communication amongst the board members, communications between the board members and the public and staff and all of that. And so we will table that to the next meeting as well.
Right, and I'd like to maybe add, that it's between us board members and the public, but I think there was still a question on how to, to talk with other boards, or you know what I mean, or how do the
Sure, we
boards
can make
talk
sure that
amongst
The topics
each other?
are
Right,
communications amongst yourselves, you with the public, and you with other boards, and all of that
Yeah.
will fall under the broad topic of bylaws pertaining to communication.
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, right. Because I know there's, the last few months, there has been other boards, other committees talking about things that we're talking about, and, do we have a representative from each board have a meeting, or how do we work that?
Sure. Okay.
All right,
I move that we table the rest of the agenda until next month and that we adjourn.
Second.
okay. All right, so I'm hearing the board wants to table the agenda until the next meeting. Is that correct?
That was the motion, yep.
Yep, that's the motion. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Say
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Nay?
Okay, no. We're good.
All right, well, with that being said, the meeting of the Police Advisory and Oversight Board will stand adjourned. Our next scheduled board meeting is February 9th at 5 PM. Otherwise, there's the town hall on January 25th at 6 PM. All right, thank you.